Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Influencer Strategists sessions. We've been doing a number of these now, and I'm really delighted to have some amazing panelists with me this afternoon. And we're going to be talking about how to engineer for post-campaign longevity and how to create that real sustainable impact. My name is Gordon Glenister, and I'm your host. I'm just going to ask my panelists, Grace and Carl, to do a little brief introduction of who they are and what they do. And if I start with Grace.
Yeah, so my name's Grace. I lead community and events here at Invited, which is an influencer marketing platform based in the UK as well as New York. So we are essentially an app where smaller creators as well as larger creators can go on and very easily find the brands that they want to collab on and the offers that they can collab on. It's very much democratizing the influencer economy, both for the creator, but also making it more accessible to smaller brands across the world. In terms of our kind of USP, we have a really strong holding on the F&B market, particularly in the UK, but it's a really exciting year in terms of expansion across a couple of other key markets.
Great. Well done. Now, you just had your third birthday, of course, haven't you? Which I was grateful to receive an invite to, literally. Yeah, great stuff. Carl, share your story.
Yeah, hi. So my name's Carl. I'm one of the co-founders of Vamp. So we started Vamp around 10, 12 years ago in Sydney, Australia, and we've gradually been opening offices in different markets. I'm currently based in our Dubai office, so servicing the Middle East. But essentially, we've built proprietary software to run large-scale influencer campaigns. So we're very much focused on working with brands that really need to leverage large amounts of creators. So, when we're working with brands that are collaborating with 200, 300 creators all at the same time, and really using the technology that we built to streamline that process from creator identification to contracting, payments, content approval, reporting, all of that's housed within our platform. So, which is overseen by an agency style model with a team in all of our major markets. Yeah, excited to be here.
Great. Lovely to have you here. Okay, so let's just start off with perhaps setting the strategic context. Grace, why do you think so many sort of influencer campaigns are short-lived? And what do you think needs to change to create that sort of enduring relevance?
I think there definitely needs to be a consistency across the use of influencers for certain campaigns rather than I think Carl probably agree with me in terms of, having one campaign and working with three influencers. In the reality, like how many consumers in your target audience are seeing that? And the thing is, particularly in the F&B, but also in the product category, you have to consider that people need to see a product again and again. They need to see brand recognition again and again in order to build that trust, build that brand recognition, and actually want to buy into it. We've also got to focus on, when we think about those short-lived things, we're looking about a trend. Like, is it, a viral hot chocolate, Dubai chocolate, something like that. That's kind of a flash in the pan. It's hot, it's sexy, and then we move on with our lives. Rather than focusing on the brand values that you want to build. And yes, you can communicate that in a variety of different ways through different campaigns, different USPs. However, it's all got to come down to what are your one, maybe two core messages that you need to get across to your audience. And that's what consumers are buying into. So working with, I think, influencers on a longer term basis, again and again across multiple touch points, across different campaigns, over a year, 2 years, that's really, when you're kind of communicating that trust between the creator and the brand, it's more likely that consumer is also going to buy into that long-term trust.
Absolutely. I mean, what do you think the number of touch points do you think one needs before like an influencer shares a brand for the first time and then actually almost through that conversion funnel? I mean, I know it's going to depend, isn't it? But
yeah,
have you any sorts of thoughts on that when you're advising clients?
Yeah, I think what's really important is having not just one touch point across one platform. Like we at Invited, we kind of encourage creators to post across Instagram and TikTok, and we encourage brands to engage with influencers on both of the platforms. However, what you've also got to consider is what is you as a brand doing to convert that touch point into a longer term relationship with the consumer. Can you, with Invited, we track all of our content through like the influencers, like linking to the socials of the brand in question, as well as our socials. So, you're encouraging like kind of brand awareness of like, can you lead that consumer onto a journey to your own socials? But then what does that look like? And has the creator been able to convey effectively your brand values that then align with your own social media? And then further on from that, like how does that touch point then lead to your website or lead to your email marketing or to your paid ads? All of those communication points need to be so in sync. It's the same when we see like across like, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, we want to take the three big platforms. Yes, all of those contents are three different like varieties of content. And yes, they do need their own different strategies. However, your brand needs to feel synonymous across all three of those. And I think it's bringing that consumer on a journey, but effectively having that same core message throughout all of those comms.
100%, 100%. Carl, what do you think distinguishes a sustainable influencer partnership from a mere transactional one?
Yeah, I think it really starts off with early thinking by the brand, what they really want to achieve out of a collaboration with an influencer. I think a lot of the time we see brands that they have a measurement metric and that's all they care about. They need to hit a certain measurement metric and they're going to focus on that as the key indicator, when really they should be looking at how can we maximize this partnership? How can we look at this outside of the social scope? And how can we use their content as an example in more touch points across all of their marketing and media campaigns, as opposed to just in a one hit, post a piece of content and then the collaboration is complete. How do we build that always on advocacy program? And that's what we do a lot of, especially around performance. So a lot of the times we will build large scale programs that are always on, where it has performance metrics, and we start to bring in all of the great performing creators, and those that aren't performing very well start to drop off, and we're constantly building this robust group of creators to build this longevity around really strong advocates for the brand, as opposed to these one-off seasonal campaigns and partnerships that are really only for a special period.
I mean, that's the other thing, of course, is that sometimes a very niche influencer, let's just say, for example, in jewelry or something, there's only going to be so many jewelry brands that they can work with. So there are challenges about the value of their content versus one that's got a wider audience, if you will, isn't it? Is realizing what you can do with that person is different to somebody that's got a wider content.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of super niche creators that are charging a lot of money to work with these brands because they know their niche and they know they create amazing content and they can get that brand uplift. And we're seeing that quite a lot, especially some of the costs that are coming through from our creators at the moment that have really focused on niche industries and niche categories as opposed to being quite broad. Yeah, they can be a bit more commanding. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's look a little bit more at extending the value of influencer content. So Grace, what I want to ask you is, what are some of the most effective ways that we can repurpose influencer content across paid, owned and retail media channels?
I think, again, focusing on that like UGC side of it, again, I think that there is a real movement to authenticity and consumers being very particular in the way that they trust the influencers. I think, Carl touched on it in terms of, those creators that niche down. They're seen as an expert in their particular field, therefore like building more trust. So being able to work with those kind of creators in a UGC capacity, extending the lifetime of that particular content that did perform well for one reason or another. Maybe it was shot well, maybe it was the product, maybe it was the influencer themselves. Extending that, I think also through like, shoppable links and being able to, again, how do you very easily bring that consumer on a journey that they are completely within all of your touch points without them having to like log off and do kind of extra admin. It's how do you bring them along that journey? But again, I think that with even those creators, you talk about extending the lifespan. I think you can't just talk about the lifespan of that particular piece of content, but it's the lifespan of the relationship. And I think relationship building between brands and influencers is so incredibly important, because that is the relationship that's going to sustain you in 3, 5, 7 years time. And building that trust as a brand evolves. And again, I think a lot of stuff when we're talking about the creator economy is coming back to authenticity and trust of opinions. And Invited, we're definitely seeing like a movement towards creators that not only they're an influencer in their own field, but they're an expert outside of the phone and outside of social media. And that's where a lot of that trust is being built, whether they are a medical doctor or, I think we've always kind of seen it with the makeup artists and hairstylists in terms of like our beauty creators, but you're seeing that across all niches. So I think the authenticity and focusing on a longer relationship rather than how can we maximize this one piece of content that went viral.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add to that, because one of the things that always fascinates me is when brands immerse the creators in their brand. And I don't mean just here's the brief. I mean, where they can, they'll invite them to their factory, or they'll give them an opportunity to experience something, so they feel a lot more engaged. It always used to amaze me why you don't take a salesperson on in your business and expect them to just go off and sell your product with a simple brief. You really give them proper training. So these are effectively these creators are your mouthpieces. So the more time that you invest with them in really giving them that experience, the more likely they're going to deliver more on-point content that's going to resonate with their audience as well as that from the brands.
Definitely. I know at Invited, we are really pushing this kind of URL in the IRL, with our in-person events, particularly like focusing on London. I know obviously you said about coming to our 3rd birthday. For us, that's a massive touch point of creating this community and creating this trust with those creators that tend to know myself or our founder Asti personally, and they have our emails, and they see us at the events, and they have that trust of like, I can go to an Invited event because I know A, B, and C, or I've seen them on my social media. And again, I think that comes back to like an EGC. It's having trust in the brand itself and bringing them through those different touch points that they can get to know, whether it's, again, your team, your product, your factory, whatever that looks like for your particular brand. It's bringing them into that whole experience so that they are a personal ambassador, not just someone who's being paid to say that they like a product.
Yeah, love that. Great points there, Grace. Thank you. I mean, just on the point of assets, Carl, where do you think brands most commonly under-leverage high-performing creator assets?
Yeah, I mean that's a big talking point, particularly for us at the moment, where we really see creators, and Grace, you mentioned it earlier, as you have the lifespan of the actual partnership, which has been just discussed, but that lifespan of the content, I think, is really underutilized. And what we're seeing is the creators can be the content engine room for these brands, and I think that's underutilized a lot. To some brands who identified this and see the value in it, and others that are really just focused on them having a partnership on their social channels. But the brands that are really embracing it are using it in amazing ways. We've got one of the big tech clients, one of the big global tech clients that are using all of the creative assets across all of their different touch points, whether it's out of home, they're using them on the big billboards, on the side of taxi cabs, on their internal assets and presentations, everywhere they are using these assets. And that's because they're performing really well. And so they don't just see creators as a way to reach their audience. They see them as a true content engine that can create authentic content that's going to resonate well with their potential customers.
Yeah, love that. Okay, let's move on to sustaining audience engagement over time. I think this is also a very fascinating period. We have actually discussed some of this in previous sessions. One of the things that I'm really fascinated in is, Grace, how important is narrative or episodal content in sustaining engagement across over a longer partnership? This is episode 1 of look for example how we watch Netflix or some of the big streaming services. All of the audience is going into these episodal content, and we're starting to see that now in creator partnerships, and I'm wondering whether or not you've seen that too.
Yeah, I think from a creator perspective, it can be really great in building a brand around content. I think Topjaw in the UK have like done that really, really well in terms of establishing their own niche, but also a style of filming that really works for them. It's really kind of stood the test of time. I think on a brand perspective, I think episodic content can be really effective. Working with different creators, or maybe it's working with the same creator but in exposing different messaging or a different product or something like that. I think episodic content, you have to execute it really well, because it can get boring and it can get repetitive if executed wrong. So again, I think a lot of it will come down to what creator is authentically aligning with your brand values. What is the natural course of their content? What do they do well? If they are a creator like the likes of Topjaw, who create this episodic content well and in an authentic manner, then it makes sense to have those kind of like narratives in there. However, I think brands just need to be careful not to shoehorn a creator into a certain type of content that potentially doesn't fit for them, and also is not going to perform with their audience, because that's not what their audience is coming to them for. I think when we look at creative integrity of our creators, that's something that we really communicate to all of our brands. Creators know their audience, they know why they're there, and the audience are showing up for a certain reason. If you take this creator and you're like, you create a content A, but I want you to make it in content B, it feels unauthentic, it feels disjointed, and actually have the complete opposite effect by actually damaging your brand, I would say, because it looks like, oh, you've just paid the person off essentially. And it's all coming back to authenticity. However, if you're engaging with a creator that naturally does that quite well, and quite a lot of creators do in various different capacities, not just Topjaw, it can work really well. But I think as a brand, focusing on what is your core narrative and then supplementing that with stories. And I think that's a different storytelling, and that's a different kind of way of looking at it. I think, you have this overarching kind of message and value. If you're going to chop that up, it's going to feel disjointed, and an audience isn't going to be able to buy into that regardless of the type of creator that you connect with. But if you have that message, you can then funnel down what are the creators I want to work with based off those values, based off that identity. And there's some amazing creators that just won't fit into that. And that's okay. Not every creator and every influencer is going to align with what your brand values are, but it's really important that you stick to those and you work with the creators that feel authentic to that message.
Interesting. Carl, I guess I'm just following on from that. How do we stop this sort of creator fatigue or overexposure, and indeed use episodal content? What's your own take on that?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to having a really broad mix. Coming from that episodal content, we're seeing quite a lot of that series-based content outperform those one-off posts. Timely being for us, me being in the Middle East, Ramadan kicking off now, we're working with a lot of brands that are building out this episodal content around the month of Ramadan. So, different food brands, different beauty brands, and they're building these series with these different types of creators because the amount of screen time goes up so significantly during Ramadan. So people are embracing that series content from their favorite creators. So we're working very closely with a lot of brands, but yeah, as Grace mentioned, if you don't get it right, if the creator doesn't get it right, then it can absolutely bomb. So it's really important in that planning stage and briefing stage with the brand to make sure that we get it right and we keep those audiences engaged with whatever it is the creator's creating for that particular brand. So yeah, I think it's a huge mix. I think it's really focused on that funnel and having a decent broad range mixed types of content depending on what the brand is looking for, and then just building a large cohort of creators so that we're not really just focused on one or two brand advocates that are going to become a little bit overused and repetitive, but really focusing on different types of creators, different niches, and different types of content on different types of platforms. So it's all about differentiation, in my opinion.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Okay. Let's move on to embedding influencers into brand ecosystems. And Grace, here, I guess my question is how can influencer partnerships integrate more effectively with brand channels such as CRM, retail, events, or community platforms?
I think it comes back to what what we were chatting about at the start, where it's all about creating these authentic relationships across multiple touch points. I think 2026 is going to be the year where we're seeing a lot of value being placed on what is happening outside of the screen and what are you getting a snippet of. And it's almost that kind of like looking through a keyhole into a party, you know, what's that little bit that makes you want more and makes you intrigued about a brand. So I think having touch points that are just far beyond sending a product and being like, you know, let's just create this content. I think what Carl said about narrative and episodic content, when you can buy into that quite well, again, you can kind of integrate different storylines that can push to different touch points, if that makes sense. Kind of consistent, whether that is an event or whether that's pushing to links to store. It's in a paid capacity, an unpaid capacity. At Invited, we work across on a barter basis and an unpaid capacity. And so all brands and all creators know from the jump that that's what's happening. However, I think there's value in considering the paid and the unpaid. And again, I think that depends on your different niche. I think it depends on what the content is, how it aligns with the content of the creator and those brand values. But I think seeing value in things that are not as transaction based is really important to be able to push to other brand channels in order to see something that you may not see across Instagram. I think the overexposure of even your own product or your own event is something that we're quite aware of, that, you know, we'll do our one post and it's not say with our third birthday, we've done a couple reels or maybe two from different perspectives, but it's not showing everything that happened in that night. It's not capturing absolutely everything. It's giving you an overall vibe of this is what happens. This is what happens when you're in part of the Invited community. You're only going to get the full photo if you're actually engaging with the brand in a meaningful way. So I think that's really important.
I mean, one of the things that I think we're going to see more of is, influencer marketing core to mainstream marketing and media activations. So it's not enough of a simple media spend, but it's actually integral. Because there was a time when the strategy team and the creative team have got their whole campaign, they're ready to go. Right, now let's go and find some influencers just to amplify that. I think that used to happen. I think more and more smart and innovative brands are realizing that they should be brought into the equation much earlier and be a key component. And I don't know whether or not, Carl, you've ever brought a creator into a pitch with a client before, but it's something I think is a great way to really excite them early doors. So I guess my question is really, you know, what does it look like when influencers are genuinely embedded into the brand ecosystem rather than just a media channel, Carl?
Yeah, it makes a complete difference. I think when brands start to shift their mindset that creators are an extension of their brand, they do see the uplift rather than just another metric. And we've touched on it a little bit earlier, but once you start to see that brands are embracing those creators and really thinking of them as a partner as opposed to just a metric generator, we see those long-term results and that advocacy there. And then I know we're going to talk about measurements in detail, but when you start to really look under the hood and start to get away from those vanity metrics and start to see what these creators are able to achieve for a brand, that's when you start to see brands shift.
Hello, Carl. Oh, we lost him. Grace, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to Carl in a second. So I want to just talk a little bit more about measurement, performance, and growth, actually, because I think that's the thing that really matters when we're talking about sustainability of campaigns more than anything else. What do you find that are some of the best metrics that are actually helping us define long-term value brand growth from influencer marketing partnerships?
I think when you come back to it, I think what most brands are looking at is their bottom line. And it's quite difficult to always take that longer term journey to look at influencer partnerships and how that's directly affecting your bottom line all of the time. Particularly, it's quite difficult to quantify influence. Like I said, influence over a longer period of time. How many times do I need to see a product on different influencers page when that actually means I'm going to go into the store and buy that product? So I think that can often be difficult to quantify. I think reach and real reach can often be an indicator of that, an indicator of definitely power of an influencer. We have partnerships with Meta and TikTok. So we actually pull the analytics of actually how many people have physically seen that piece of content, not just a bit of a guesstimate around, okay, this is what their follower count is, this is what their general likes are, this is what their general type of comments are. And I think looking at like how many people actually have seen that piece of content, and it's quite difficult to, again, if you're going to do a one-time campaign of like, we're working with this one influencer and this one post one time, how to quantify that's actually going to result in sales. I think we see a lot of that around Christmas, of brands being like, suddenly I'm going to engage with influencers in like mid-December. And it's like, well, you're not going to be able to actually see how that as a strategy is going to work out. That's probably a waste of your money. Now, if you've done a 12-month strategy with influencers in various different capacities, building up to your Christmas content in the middle of November, then you're going to be able to see what that actually looks like over a 12-month period. I think reach, I think if you want to quantify it in a direct result of your bottom line, AF links are always a great indicator of that, as well with a percentage change in interactions with own channels. But I think that can also be impacted by your own social media and a viral moment or certain things like that. So I think you can look at those as general indicators. But I think marketing, particularly influencer marketing, it's not just a science, it's an art and a science. So some of it has got to be, let's look over a long period of time, see how this strategy, we know exactly how many sales this is driven due to like links or store advertising or something like that. But it's coming back to even traditional advertising. When you put up a billboard, you don't know exactly how many eyes have seen that and exactly how many purchases that has then funneled into your system. Over a general campaign, the percentage increase from the year before and what you've done differently. I think
that's a good point. I mean, it's a very good point. I think one of the struggles often is attribution, isn't it? It's being able to figure out where it should even go on the marketing budget, because is it part of PR, is it part of social media, or is it part of general marketing? And I think once we've got our own line on the marketing budget, we've come of age, as I often say. But no, really good points, Grace. And I want to just have your thoughts on this, Carl, as well, about sort of how do we balance these short-term metrics with more long-term brand equity and trust, which are very important in the context of this session today.
Yeah. I think looking at the funnel as sort of short-term performance KPIs in terms of, ROAS very much helps. Looking at sales uplift data, asset usage, but we're looking at more the lower funnel and then looking at more of the upper funnel. We've been doing a lot of brand lift studies for our long-term clients. So we'll do a lot of looking at trust data, cultural relevance, consideration, advocacy. So we'll start to do these brand lift studies throughout the lifetime of the partnership, maybe over 12 to 18 months, to start to see if we're able to see any changes based on utilizing influencers across the longer term period, as opposed to those short term KPIs, which really is focused on the sales side of things and potentially some of those other metrics like your impressions and reach and so on and so on. But yeah, long term is brand lift for us, and we find that really important. Brands really love the reporting side of this to see the true results.
Well, also we're speaking their language, aren't they? Because those are the sorts of metrics that they've got to share. So it's important that they do our languages convey theirs as well. Great, really lovely to hear your thoughts and perspective. And we'll finish in a few minutes on sort of some of the future facing approaches to long-term activation. But I just want to pull a few things from the chat actually. So let's have a look at future facing, what we think is going to happen in the future and how we keep this enduring messaging campaign. So what role will data, AI or automation play, do you think, in scaling influencer partnerships while maintaining authenticity?
I think there's going to be allow for greater transparency around what are the real numbers rather than the vanity numbers around the creator economy. I think it's very easy to have bots. You've talked about AI slop. I think there's a lot of challenges and changes coming to the industry right now that we've seen that I think everyone is still kind of grappling to see the wood for the trees a little bit. And so I think with the changing expectations, and I think with AI, I think we're going to get a greater clarity around what that looks like. And it will really bring to the forefront what are those creators making an actual difference to your company's bottom line, and to brand growth and brand reputation, rather than, they're putting something on their story, but in reality, they may have 200,000 followers, but their story is getting 80 views. What difference is that actually making to your brand? I think it's also going to be able to decipher better, like, who you want to work with in your niche. How do you discover those smaller creators that, they may have 10,000 followers, but their videos are getting 35,000 views? I think it's also going to point out those kind of bad engagement, bad brand alignment, and make things a lot faster moving, and potentially democratize the industry a little bit in terms of creators.
Definitely. No, it's really, really points well made, really. I mean, everything we can do at scale, that's the thing, isn't it? And we need, we can make better informed decisions, because largely AI is about understanding data and using it in the right, proper way. Carl, on the AI front, what's your thoughts about whether or not it's going to help for, greater long-term campaigns?
Yeah, I think AI is going to complement both the creator and the brand in that partnership process, particularly being able to scale out, because I think ultimately, as we look long term, I think brands are going to want to work with more creators, more diversified, more content, and AI is only going to support that in terms of just being able to speed up that collaboration process, particularly when as Grace has said, analyzing a creator's audience data as an example to identify if they're the right fit, to contract negotiations, to approval of content, even just the creators being able to utilize AI to quickly edit feedback from a brand so that they're not, sitting on CapCut or any of the edit studios for as long as they are. Reporting, it's all going to be really complementary, I feel, as opposed to, the doom and gloom that you tend to hear about. I think it's going to really just help those creators become better at what they do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that always intrigues me is when the Olympics bid goes out to the various countries. Obviously, that's a huge process, as you can imagine, all around the world, and there's lots of investment going into that. But sustainability is a key component as to what's going to happen afterwards. Now, the reason I mention it is because, this session was all about how do we create longevity and sustainable campaigns so that brands feel invested into influencer marketing, not just being a small part of their marketing budget, but a sizable part, and that it's more than just a campaign. It creates a lasting, enduring impact. And it may be because we start to do different types of campaign, as I was saying earlier, the Doves of this world that have real social impact. So I guess final words from both of you. If you were speaking to a brand now and they said to you, right, we want to do something with influence, but we want to leave a lasting, sustainable impact for our brand, what are the sorts of messages and advice would you be giving them? Grace?
I think I would be focused on how are you structuring your messaging? What is the core thing you need to communicate over 12 months, not on a 6-week campaign? What are the complementary story piece elements you want to communicate through that? And then finding creators that align with that and whose content, regardless of follower count, are really making it an impact and a follow through. Working with a diversity of types of content, follower counts, maybe potentially depending on the business, region, language, and having that diversity. Where you're not having that diversity is your brand messaging and your brand alignment. That needs to stay consistent across all of the touch points. And again, I think being open to that longer term that longer timeline in terms of those results coming in, and focusing on the elevation in brand reputation as an indicator. Social listening is a massive thing, and I think with AI and automation, it's only going to grow and become more prevalent in influencer marketing. So yeah, I think that would be the advice that I would give.
Wonderful. That's great. Carl.
Yeah, Grace said it very well. I think ultimately it starts from the very start for a brand and really knowing what they want long term out of a partnership with a creator or creators, and really understanding how they can maximize that longevity using whether it's content or them as a brand throughout a sustained period, as opposed to a sugar hit scenario where they basically collaborate with them on a single program. So I really think it comes back to the brand really knowing what they want from the very start and not trying to wing it, throughout the year, and really just building for a long-term success as opposed to, short-term success.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, look, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us this afternoon. We really, really appreciate it. And I think we've got some wonderful insights from both of you there. So from me, Gordon Glenister, it's cheerio.
Thank you, guys.
Unless, Shannon, you want to say anything else? No, we're all good. Look out for the next sessions that we've got on our platform. Loads more exciting reports and lots of amazing content too, which you can see on the main site. Yeah, so here we go. These are the upcoming events that we've got. The 23rd, which is about employee and founder influence frameworks that actually work. And then on the 24th, we've got AI in influencer marketing, automation. And another big one that we've got a lot of people that have already signed up to on the 2nd of March is how influencer impact is measured by some of the big leading brands. So anyway, that's a bit of a taster for what's coming. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
I think we just have to go.
Thanks, good. Mate. Bye-bye.